If you've made it this far, you felt the fire between Brandon and Sam, didn't you? Their story is just getting started, and tomorrow's episode will reveal something even more unexpected. But before that, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? I love seeing our Storytime family grow from all corners of the globe. Drop your city or country in the comments. Let's connect. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the so you won't miss what happens next. Trust me, you won't want to miss tomorrow's twist. See you soon, a fiery first encounter. Brandon Scott was the kind of boss who didn't need to raise his voice to be feared. His presence alone, tall at 6'2", sharp in a perfectly tailored suit, and with eyes that could slice through concrete, was enough to silence an entire floor. He ran Scott & Carber's architects like a machine, efficient, high-performing, and absolutely unforgiving. Mistakes weren't corrected, they were erased. That's why when his assistant told him they had hired a new janitor, and that it was a young woman, his brow furrowed. "She better know what she's doing," he muttered, sipping his black coffee still steaming. Enter Samantha Collins. 24 years old, 5'3" and barely 115 pounds, she walked into the office with her chin up and a mop in hand. Not the image of someone who would challenge a billionaire CEO, but fate doesn't follow stereotypes. The first time they crossed paths, Brandon had just come back from a frustrating board meeting. His office, which he left spotless, now had a damp floor and the faint smell of lavender cleaner. And there she was, mopping without a care in the world, humming a Taylor Swift song under her breath. "You missed a spot," he snapped coldly, without even looking at her. Samantha didn't flinch. She looked up at him, raised a brow and smiled. "Thanks, Mr. Tall, Dark and Grumpy. I'll circle back to it." Brandon froze. No one, not one employee in 10 years, had ever responded to him like that. His jaw clenched. He turned around, his eyes narrowing as they met hers. "What did you just call me?" "I said thank you, sir," she replied sweetly, twirling the mop and going back to work. That night Brandon couldn't sleep. He wasn't sure what annoyed him more, her attitude, her smile, or the fact that he almost smirked when she said it. She was unlike anyone he'd ever hired, confident, unbothered. Not the type to walk on eggshells, and definitely not the type to fear him. But Samantha didn't think about him at all. She had bills to pay, a sister in the hospital, and zero time to waste caring about the CEO's mood swings. Still, something about Brandon's expression, that mixture of arrogance and confusion, made her want to poke the bear again, and she would, many, many times. That first encounter set the tone for what would become a stormy, unexpected connection between two people from completely different worlds. She thought he was full of himself. He thought she was out of line. And yet, they couldn't stop noticing each other. 2 hearts, 1 office, and a whole lot of tension. And that one was just day one. A marriage deal with real stakes. From the moment Samantha called him Mr. Tall, Dark, and Grumpy, something shifted. Not that Brandon Scott would admit it. No, he buried whatever flicker of curiosity he had under layers of work, deadlines, and his usual no-nonsense attitude. But Samantha, she kept popping up, in hallways, elevators, and even accidentally barging into his office with a mop bucket once. Their exchanges were short, sarcastic, and always left someone, usually Brandon, more irritated than before. But the real twist came one Wednesday morning. A vital contract had gone missing, one worth nearly $2.5 million. It was the final piece for a high-profile hotel project in Los Angeles. Chaos unfolded fast. Brandon was fuming, staff were scrambling, and blame was flying everywhere like confetti. Then came the scapegoat, a junior staffer named Aaron, fresh. Out of college and clearly terrified, Brandon was ready to fire him on the spot. That's when Samantha stepped in. She didn't knock. She barged into Brandon's office mid-yelling, her eyes fierce, her voice steady. "It wasn't Aaron. I was cleaning near the desk. I saw another employee, Kevin, your assistant manager, take a stack of folders yesterday. Maybe he didn't realize what was inside." Brandon's eyes narrowed. "You expect me to believe you know more than my management team?" "No," she said. "I expect you to be fair." He almost laughed. Almost. And then she said it. "I'll make you a deal." Brandon paused. "What kind of deal?" "If you..." "Don't fire Aaron. If you give him another chance, I'll do something in return." Something that'll shut your grandfather up and get your mother off your back. Now that got his attention. I'll marry you, she said, voice low, calm and serious. You get to parade me around as your wife. Calm your family down, make them think you're finally settling down. In return, you don't ruin that kid's future over one mistake. He stared at her, speechless for a beat. Then he leaned back in his leather chair, studying her like she was an unsolvable puzzle. You'd marry me just like that? Samantha crossed her arms. You're not that hard to tolerate. And I've seen worse men with bigger egos. Besides, I need the job. My sister needs her medication. You help people who don't deserve it. Maybe it's time someone made a deal with the devil. Brandon hated being called that. But something about her tone, steady, fearless, daring, made him curious. And so, with the stroke of a pen, Brandon Scott agreed to a fake marriage with the company Janitress. Neither of them could have guessed that this deal would be the beginning of something they'd never be able to walk away from. The Ice King begins to thaw. It was supposed to be simple, a contract, not a commitment. That's what Brandon told himself the night after Samantha signed the marriage agreement. They even shook hands like business partners. No feelings, no drama. She'd wear the ring, smile at his grandfather's dinner table, and pretend to love a man she could barely stand. In return, he'd keep her job safe, and more importantly, make sure her sister's next round of treatment was fully covered. But reality? It was far from simple. 2 days after the deal, Samantha moved into Brandon's home, a sleek modern house just outside downtown Chicago. Over 4,000 square feet of stone, steel, and silence. It was cold, sterile, lifeless, just like its owner. You live here alone? She asked, glancing around the place like it was a museum. I don't like noise, he muttered, carrying her small suitcase with one hand. Well, you're in luck, she shot back, tossing her jacket on the pristine white couch. I talk more than I clean, he sighed, loudly. They were oil and water from the start. She left dishes in the sink. He folded his towels with military precision. She danced barefoot in the kitchen. He scheduled his coffee breaks down to the minute. And yet, somewhere between the chaos and the clashing, something began to shift. Brandon found himself lingering in the kitchen just to watch her sing along to 90s pop songs. He caught himself laughing, actually laughing, when she beat him at Scrabble and did a victory dance across the living room. And at night, instead of burying himself in reports, he stood outside her guest room door, just listening to the faint hum of her voice as she called her sister. Night, Lou, she whispered once. I'm okay. I've got it under control. Just focus on getting better. He never told her he heard that, but he started making sure dinner was ready when she came home from her night shift. And when Lucy's meds ran out, he didn't wait for her to ask. He had them delivered the same day. One evening, after a long day at work, he came home to find the lights dimmed, candles lit, and the smell of something sweet in the air. I made cookies, she said casually. Thought you might want to try something warm for once, besides your attitude. Brandon blinked. Then, surprisingly, he sat down, took a bite, and smiled. It was the first time Samantha had ever seen him smile, not the fake one he gave investors, but a real soft one. It threw her off, made her stomach do something strange, and it hit her. This man, cold and closed off as he was, wasn't made of stone. He'd just forgotten how to be human. But now, he was remembering, and she was the reason why. Love grows where it shouldn't. At first, it was easy to pretend. They kept up appearances for Grandpa Joe and Karen, held hands at dinner, smiled for photos, and even shared whispered jokes like a real couple. But once the cameras and questions were gone, it was back to separate bedrooms and snarky banter. That was their rhythm, sarcastic, distant, manageable, until it wasn't. It started with glances, quick, quiet looks, when the other wasn't paying attention. Brandon would catch himself watching Samantha tie her hair into a messy bun, or laughing at some dumb meme she saw on her phone. Samantha, on the other hand, began to notice how different he looked when he wasn't barking orders, like when he fed the stray cat that had started hanging around the porch, or when he stood by the window at night, sipping whiskey and thinking too deeply. Neither of them said it aloud, but something was shifting. One Thursday evening, the shift became impossible to ignore. Samantha had just finished cleaning the kitchen. After dinner, lemon-scented candles burning on the counter, soft jazz playing in the background. Brandon walked in, loosened his tie, and leaned on the island. "You know," she said without looking up, "you should really learn how to relax before you age 10 years overnight." "I don't age," he deadpanned. "I just evolve into a more annoyed version of myself." She smirked, tossing him a dish towel. "Cute." He caught it, stared at her a moment too long. "You make this place less quiet." "I make you less miserable," she teased. He didn't respond, not with words. Instead, he stepped closer until there was barely a foot between them. The music filled the silence, low and slow, like a heartbeat. Samantha's breath caught as his eyes dropped briefly to her lips. But then, just as quickly, he pulled back. "Good night, Sam," he said, voice low, almost unsure. She stood there, heart racing. Good night. She didn't sleep well. Neither did he. The next morning, tension hung in the air like fog. Every brush of the hand, every sideways glance, it all felt heavier now, charged, confusing. Later that day, Chris dropped by, and after noticing the strange energy between them, pulled Brandon aside. "Dude, you're falling for her," he said bluntly. Brandon scoffed. "That's not possible." Chris grinned. "You're right. That's why you've been smiling like a middle schooler since Tuesday." Brandon didn't reply, because deep down he knew it was true. He had no business falling for Samantha, the woman who mopped his floors, mocked his rules, and challenged him daily. But here he was, lying awake at night, thinking about the way she wrinkled her nose when she laughed, and wondering how he'd ever lived in silence before she came along. He thought he was safe behind the walls he built. But Samantha Collins wasn't afraid of walls. She just walked right through them. From contract to commitment, the kiss didn't happen the night Brandon almost leaned in, but it haunted them both. Days passed, and the lines between pretend and real blurred faster than either of them expected. Samantha still rolled her eyes at his overly structured routines, and Brandon still called her messy. But now their fights had fire and their silence had weight. There were moments where his hand brushed hers, or she'd laugh just a little too hard at his rare jokes, and something would stir. Then came the morning sickness. At first, Samantha blamed the late-night takeout, but when the nausea didn't go away, and when she realized she was 2 months late, reality hit her harder than she was ready for. She was pregnant with Brandon Scott's child. Correction, children, twins. She didn't know how to tell him. Their marriage was fake, wasn't it? Built on convenience, survival, protection. But how do you fake the sound of 2 tiny heartbeats? When she finally told him, in the kitchen, wearing pajamas and clutching a positive test like a grenade, he didn't say anything. He just stared at her. Then he pulled her into his arms. "I'm not letting you do this alone," he whispered. That's when she realized she wasn't pretending anymore. Neither was he. From that day forward, everything changed. Brandon became someone else, or maybe just the version of himself he'd hidden for years. He was present, attentive. He talked to the twins through Samantha's belly like they could hear him. He cancelled meetings to take her to checkups, learned how to cook healthy meals, and even read baby books at night when he thought she was asleep. He wasn't just in this. He was all in. One night, while they were lying on the couch, her head resting on his chest, she looked up at him and asked, "Did you ever think we'd end up like this?" He smirked, running his fingers through her hair. "Not in a million years." "Do you regret it?" He paused, then kissed her forehead. "Only that I didn't meet you sooner. It wasn't just love anymore. It was trust, partnership, a real marriage, born from chaos but strengthened by everything they overcame together." When the twins finally arrived, 2 healthy baby girls, Brandon cried. Actual tears. Grandpa Joe passed out cigars. Karen threw a massive welcome party, and even Chris showed up in a Tupper One Uncle t-shirt. And Samantha? She stood beside Brandon, holding their daughters, her heart full. Once upon a time, she was just the janitor. Now she was a wife, a mother, and the woman who softened the heart of the coldest CEO in Chicago. What started as a deal turned into The greatest love story neither of them saw coming. And this time it wasn't part of the plan, it was real. And now that you've heard Brandon and Samantha's journey, from strangers to soulmates, from a fake marriage to a real family, want to hear from you. What was your favorite moment in their story? Was it their first fiery encounter, that unexpected proposal deal, or the moment Brandon finally softened his heart? I know many of you are hopeless romantics just like me, so don't be shy. Let's talk love, fate, and the magic of unexpected. Connections, comment below, and tell me what part made you smile, made your heart race, or even made you tear up a little. Also, let me know where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how stories bring us together from all around the world. And hey, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because tomorrow, we've got a brand new story full of twists, emotions, and surprises you won't want to miss. Until then, stay in love with love, and I'll see you in the next one.